Imagine your company's flagship product suddenly loses like 42% of its U.S. sales in a single year. You'd expect panic.
Oh, absolutely. Like emergency cost cutting.
Emergency, cost cutting, maybe some kind of desperate pivot, or at least, a very conservative approach to the corporate bank account.
Right.
But instead, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals took that massive hit, bought an FDA fast pass for $155 million, and this is wild, spent $3.4 billion buying back their own stock.
It's definitely not your typical crisis management.
No, it really isn't. And today, for you listening, we're opening up their December 31st, 2025 SEC Form 10-K to figure out how a $54 billion biotech giant actually pulls that off.
It's just a phenomenal document to read, honestly, because SEC filings are stripped of all that, marketing spin.
Oh, completely.
A 10-K forces a company to lay out exactly where their cash comes from, where it goes, and basically every single existential threat to their entire business model.
Which makes it the perfect shortcut for you to actually understand the mechanics of modern medicine. We're going to unpack the exact products they sell, their highly specialized business model, and who's actually cutting them the checks.
Yeah, the customer base is fascinating.
It really is. Plus, we'll break down the crazy tug of war in their 2025 profitability compared to 2024 and dissect their cash flows, margins, and return on equity. So if you want the insider knowledge without the information overload, you're in the right place. I'm Jack.
And I'm Misha.
So before we can really dissect the financial engine here, we have to look at the fuel, right? In 2025, Regeneron generated $14.34 billion in total revenues.
That's billion with a B.
Billion with a B. But they aren't selling like thousands of different over-the-counter pills. Their entire financial structure is built on just a few massive, highly specialized biological therapies.
Yeah, so the foundation of that $14.3 billion rests really heavily on two primary pillars. First, you have their eye care franchise, which is Eylea and its high-dose successor, Eylea HD. These are treatments for severe eye conditions, mostly wet age-related macular degeneration.
Right.
And we're talking about a disease where abnormal blood vessels basically grow underneath the retina, they leak fluid, and they cause blindness.
Wow.
Yeah. So Eylea is an anti-VEGF inhibitor. And this sounds intense, literally injected into the eye.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but it blocks a specific protein to stop those blood vessels from growing and leaking.
It's an incredibly targeted mechanism. And then you look at their other major pillar, which is on the immunology side, and that's dominated by a drug called Dupixent.
Yes. Dupixent is an absolute powerhouse.
The 10K shows it's massive. It treats conditions driven by type 2 inflammation, so we're talking severe asthma, and atopic dermatitis, which is a really debilitating chronic form of eczema.
Right, and it works by blocking specific signaling proteins that cause that overactive immune response.
Got it.
So those two, Eylea and Dupixent, those are the heavy hitters. I mean, they do have a diversified pipeline beyond that.
Yeah, the 10K mentions an oncology footprint, right?
Exactly. Drugs like Libtayo for specific skin and lung cancers. And they also have cardiovascular treatments like Praluent for lowering cholesterol, and even an FDA-approved treatment for Ebola called Inmazeb.
Which is pretty amazing. So we have this portfolio of highly complex, highly targeted biologics. But, reading through the customer breakdown in this report reveals this massive misconception about how these drugs actually reach the market.
Oh, totally.
Because you picture a patient picking up a prescription at a corner pharmacy, but Regeneron is not selling these drugs directly to patients.
Not at all. The entities actually cutting the checks directly to Regeneron are wholesalers, specialty distributors, massive pharmacy chains, and hospitals.
And this is where the data made me stop and reread a paragraph, because
Okay.
the 10K explicitly states that just 2 distributor customers account for 77% of their gross product revenue.
That's 77%.
That's wild. 2 companies control more than 3/4 of their physical cash flow. Isn't that an incredibly dangerous bottleneck? Like, if one of those 2 distributors faces a logistical failure or a financial crisis, more than 1/3 of Regeneron's revenue is just instantly paralyzed.
Well, on paper, revenue concentration risk is a classic red flag. The SEC actually requires them to disclose it for exactly that reason.
Right.
But you have to look at the mechanics of specialty pharmaceutical distribution to understand why Regeneron intentionally sets it up this way.
Okay, why?
Because these aren't, shelf-stable tablets in a plastic bottle. These are complex biologics. They require very strict cold chain storage.
Ah, temperature control.
Exactly. They have highly specific handling protocols, and honestly, the reimbursement navigation with insurance companies is an absolute labyrinth.
Meaning you actually want the fewest number of hands touching the product as possible, provided they're the right hands.
Precisely. By funneling the vast majority of their physical product through just a couple of massive, highly specialized distribution networks, Regeneron is able to run a very lean commercial operation.
Oh, I see.
Think about the alternative, right?
Yeah.
They would have to manage thousands of individual accounts across the country, chase down payments from countless small medical facilities.
Build a massive internal logistics fleet?
Exactly. By relying on two major partners, they dramatically reduce their operational overhead. It's a calculated risk that maximizes their efficiency.
That makes a lot of sense. So knowing they run this hyper-concentrated distribution pipeline naturally raises the next question, which is, how do they feed it?
Yeah.
Because inventing biologics that rewrite immune responses or, stop blindness is notoriously difficult and astronomically expensive. So how do they structure the actual business of drug discovery to maintain their profitability?
Well, the core of their strategy is that they view themselves primarily as an invention machine. They have these proprietary in-house technology platforms. They call them VelociSuite, and they run the Regeneron Genetic Center.
Okay, VelociSuite.
Yeah. And the mechanism here is crucial. Instead of the traditional pharmaceutical approach where you just blindly test thousands of compounds to see what works.
Throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Right, exactly. Instead of that, they sequence the genomic data of hundreds of thousands of people. They look for natural genetic mutations that actually protect people from certain diseases.
Wow.
And that gives them a literal biological map of what molecules their drugs need to target.
So they have this cutting-edge, data-driven discovery engine in-house. But discovering a molecule in a lab in New York is very different from navigating regulatory hurdles and running sales teams in 50 different countries.
Which is exactly why their commercialization strategy relies on massive, deeply integrated collaborations.
Right, the partnerships.
Yeah. They partner with global pharmaceutical giants.
No.
So Sanofi handles Dupixent globally, and Bayer handles the commercialization of Eylea outside of the United States.
Okay, so if I'm visualizing this for everyone listening, is it kind of like a brilliant indie software developer partnering with Apple or Google? Like Regeneron writes the groundbreaking code the drug and then uploads it to the pre-existing global infrastructure of Sanofi and Bayer to distribute the product everywhere else, and they just split the costs and profits.
It's a bit more integrated than an app store. It's probably closer to a boutique hypercar engineer partnering with Ford.
Okay.
Regeneron designs this groundbreaking, incredibly complex engine completely in-house. But they don't want to build global factories. They don't want to manage international compliance teams or run a worldwide dealership network.
Yeah, that's not their thing.
Right. So they leverage Ford's massive pre-existing global infrastructure to actually get the cars into driveways worldwide. Regeneron and their partners share the brutal research and development costs up front, and then they share the profits on the back end.
That is smart. And when you combine that specialized distribution with this global partnership model, you get a financial engine that throws off staggering numbers. Let's look at the actual profitability metrics for 2025, starting with their gross margin. On net product sales, they reported a gross margin of 82%.
Which is just an elite metric for any industry, let alone manufacturing complex biologics.
Seriously.
However, we do need to note the trend line there. That 82% is actually a slight drop from the 86% gross margin they posted in 2024.
Right, and the 10K breaks down exactly what caused that 4% dip. And it's not just a rounding error. It was driven by three very specific factors.
Yep.
First, they're heavily investing in expanding their own manufacturing operations to build capacity for future drugs. Second, they took higher inventory write-offs.
Which is just a reality of dealing with biological material.
Yeah.
Like if a batch of active pharmaceutical ingredients expires, or if it fails a stringent quality control check, it can't be sold.
It's used.
It has to be written off as a complete loss, yeah, which hits the gross margin directly.
Right. And the third factor driving the margin down was higher amortization expenses related to royalties they owe to Sanofi for the oncology drug, Libtayo.
Exactly.
But even absorbing those costs, the underlying efficiency of this company is wild. They posted $4.5 billion in net income on $14.3 billion in total revenue.
Yeah.
That translates to a net margin of over 31%, meaning for every single dollar that comes in the door, 31 cents drops straight to the bottom line as pure profit.
It's huge. And to To really contextualize that level of efficiency, look at their return on equity, or ROE. They generated that $4.5 billion in net income against a massive $31.2 billion base of stockholders' equity.
So what does that math come out to?
That means you are looking at a return on equity of over 14%. Management is taking the capital entrusted to them and generating a 14% pure profit return in a single year, all while funding highly speculative scientific research.
It's a beautiful machine. But 2025 was not a smooth ride. That net income number growing from $4.4 billion in 2024 to $4.5 billion in 2025, it actually hides some serious turbulence.
Oh, absolutely.
Getting to that slight increase is essentially a tale of two flagship drugs moving aggressively in opposite directions.
Yeah, so the upward driver, the absolute hero of their 2025 income statement, is Dupixent and the broader Sanofi collaboration.
Right.
The market penetration for Dupixent is just accelerating rapidly across multiple inflammatory conditions. Regeneron's share of the profits from that Sanofi collaboration, which includes Dupixent and another drug called Kevzara, grew to an astonishing $5.2 billion in 2025.
$5.2 billion just from their slice of the partnership pie.
Yep.
That hypercar partnership model is paying off brilliantly. But then you turn the page in the SEC filing and the downward driver hits you like a ton of bricks. U.S. sales of their legacy flagship drug, regular Eylea, fell off a cliff.
Yeah, it was bad.
We're talking about a 42% plunge, dropping from $4.7 billion in 2024 down to $2.7 billion in 2025. Wait, a patent expiration in May 2024 doesn't magically make doctors change their prescribing habits overnight? A 42% drop representing $2 billion evaporating in a single year is violently fast. How is market share being stolen that quickly?
Well, it's a combination of systemic pressure and pricing mechanics. Once regular Eylea's U.S. regulatory exclusivity expired in May 2024, the invisible shield protecting their monopoly essentially dropped. The immediate threat was the entry of biosimilars.
Which are basically the generic versions of biologic drugs, right?
Conceptually, yes, though they're vastly more complex to manufacture than, like, standard generic pills. But they're FDA approved to offer the exact same clinical benefit.
Got it.
And when a biosimilar enters the market at a notably lower price point, insurance companies and Medicare aggressively push providers to prescribe the cheaper option. They construct their reimbursement tiers to force the market share away from the expensive branded drug.
So the insurance networks are actively redirecting the traffic.
Exactly. But the 10K also points to a second, totally different threat eroding Eylea's sales, which is compounded bevacizumab.
Compounded bevacizumab. Okay, what is that?
It highlights the intense affordability constraints in the healthcare system. Bevacizumab is the generic name for Avastin, which is an older, much cheaper cancer drug that works by a very similar anti-VEGF mechanism.
Oh, wow.
Right. Because Eylea is so expensive, specialized compounding pharmacies have started taking vials of this older cancer drug and breaking them down into tiny microdoses suitable for eye injections.
Wait, really? So they're taking a totally different drug, splitting it into 50 pieces, and using it off-label purely because the math works better for the patient and the provider.
Exactly the mechanism. So between the systemic push toward official biosimilars and the grassroots shift toward off-label compounded drugs, regular Eylea is fighting a multi-front war on price.
Okay, so you have Dupixent soaring, Eylea sinking, and overall profit still squeaking up by $100 million. But there is another headwind in 2025 pushing against those profits, and it came directly from the U.S. government.
Yes. The tax landscape underwent a seismic shift in July 2025 with the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
Yes.
Colloquially referred to in the financial world as OBBBA.
And just to be clear, for you listening, we're looking at this purely from a balance sheet perspective, right? We're impartially reporting the numbers from the 10K, not taking any stance on the politics or policy of the bill itself.
Exactly. The accounting reality is that OBBBA significantly altered U.S. corporate income tax laws. It specifically changed the mechanics of how foreign earnings are taxed and how research and development expenditures can be deducted.
And for Regeneron.
Right. For a globally operating R&D-heavy company like Regeneron, the math was brutal. Their effective tax rate nearly doubled. It jumped from a very low 7.7% in 2024 up to 13.9% in 2025.
The 10K also notes they had to take an immediate $44.5 million charge just to remeasure their deferred tax assets under the new rules. The financial engine had to work significantly harder just to maintain the same level of profitability.
Yeah, it was a major drag.
Which brings us to the ultimate reality check of any SEC filing. Net income is an accounting construct. It includes non-cash items, depreciation, deferred taxes. If we want to know what actually happened, we have to follow the physical money.
We have to look at the statement of cash flows.
Exactly.
The cash flow statement strips away the accounting theories and shows you the actual movement of dollars. And their operating cash flow proves that the core engine is incredibly robust. In 2025, the daily operations of inventing, manufacturing, and selling drugs generated $4.9 billion in pure cash.
Wow.
That is up from $4.4 billion the previous year.
So they generated $4.9 billion in cash. The next question is, where did they deploy it? Looking at their investing cash flow, they spent $629.1 million. A large chunk of that went into physical infrastructure. They're expanding their corporate headquarters and research labs in Tarrytown, New York, and pouring capital into their massive manufacturing facilities in Rensselaer, New York, and Limerick, Ireland. They're physically building the capacity to produce the next generation of medicines.
They are, but the investing section also reveals a truly fascinating strategic purchase.
Oh, this part, yes.
They spent $155 million to acquire something called a rare pediatric disease priority review voucher from a third party.
Okay, this absolutely blew my mind. They literally bought a fast pass for the FDA line. How does the government even allow a company to buy their way to the front of a regulatory queue?
Well, it sounds controversial, but the mechanism is actually a deliberate regulatory incentive.
Really?
Yeah. Developing drugs for rare pediatric diseases is often financially unviable because the patient population is just so small. To encourage research, the FDA rewards any company that successfully gets a rare pediatric drug approved with one of these priority review vouchers.
Okay, I'm following.
And the voucher guarantees that a future drug application will be reviewed by the FDA in 6 months instead of the standard 10 months. And the crucial mechanism here is that the FDA makes these vouchers fully transferable.
Oh, so the company that invents the unprofitable pediatric drug can sell the voucher on the open market to fund their operations, and a giant like Regeneron can just buy it to speed up their own timeline.
Exactly. For a potential multi-billion-dollar blockbuster drug, accelerating the market entry by 4 months is worth infinitely more than the $155 million they paid for the voucher.
That is incredible.
Yeah, and Regeneron actually utilized this specific voucher in the fourth quarter of 2025 for a new regulatory submission. It's a highly calculated, high-return investment.
It's a brilliant piece of leverage, but I mean, it looks like pocket change compared to what they did in the finance and cash flow section. They used a massive $3.7 billion in financing activity.
Huge amount of capital.
Yeah, and looking at the breakdown, out of that $3.7 billion, $3.4 billion was spent entirely on buying back their own common stock. Let's just frame this for a second. Their legacy flagship drug, Eylea, is in a free fall, losing 42% of its revenue to generics. Their tax bill just doubled. And yet they are generating so much cash from Dupixent that they can absorb all of that and still have $3.4 billion lying around to aggressively buy their own shares.
Yeah, the magnitude of that stock repurchase is probably the most important signal in the entire 10K. When an executive management team authorizes billions in share buybacks while simultaneously navigating a massive patent cliff, it signals supreme internal confidence.
They aren't hoarding cash in a panic to weather the storm.
No, not at all. They're aggressively buying their own equity because their internal projections suggest the current stock price does not fully reflect the future value of the drugs currently in their pipeline.
Right.
They're betting on their own ability to successfully pivot from the Eylea era into the next wave of biological innovation.
Which is the perfect synthesis of what you, our listener, can take away from this 10K. Regeneron is really a masterclass in the mechanics of the modern biotech business. It proves that good science is merely the entry fee,
Absolutely.
To actually sustain a $54 billion valuation, you need a highly unique partnership model that achieves 82% gross margins. You need to relentlessly trim operational fat by hyper-concentrating your distribution. And most importantly, you have to run a financial engine so efficient that it can fund the next major breakthrough before the patent expires on your last one.
The lifecycle management is just ruthless. You cannot rest on the laurels of a blockbuster drug because the second that regulatory exclusivity expires, the market will systematically dismantle your monopoly.
Which leaves us with a fascinating forward-looking question to ponder. With Eylea facing fierce multi-front generic competition, Regeneron is forced to look to completely new frontiers. The 10K mentions their heavy bets on CRISPR-based in vivo gene editing therapies.
Yeah, the Next program.
Right, specifically a program called NextSize aimed at treating a fatal amyloidosis disease. They're moving from injecting proteins to literally deploying genetic scissors to edit DNA inside the human body.
It's science fiction stuff.
It really is. But as the era of easy, single-target blockbuster drugs gets more crowded and the science gets exponentially harder, will gene editing be enough to build their next $5 billion safety net?
That's the existential question for their next decade, honestly. Can their genomic invention machine successfully reinvent the company's revenue base one more time?
Well, we will definitely be watching the next few years of SEC filings to find out. Parsing a 90-page financial document might initially feel like translating a dead language, but once you understand the mechanics behind the vocabulary, the distribution bottlenecks, the margin drivers, the FDA fast passes, and the patent cliffs, you realize it's actually a thriller.
Yeah, it is.
You're watching billions of dollars race against the relentless clock of scientific innovation. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.